First of all, I just want to say thank you all for calling in from wherever you are. We really appreciate your time and your care about this issue affecting our beautiful savanna landscape on the Daly River. My name is Kirsty Howey and I'm the Executive Director of the Environment Centre of the Northern Territory, and I will begin by acknowledging that wherever we are on unceded Aboriginal land. I'm speaking to you from rain-soaked Larrakia country, and I acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. I also want to extend an acknowledgement to the Waggaman people, the traditional owners of Claravale, who have been a key part of this campaign and continue to be. I would also like to just extend an acknowledgement to traditional owners and First Nations people across really the whole of the Northern Territory. We are experiencing an unprecedented back-to-back sequence of climate disasters. The Catherine River is still rising. The residents of the Daly River, including the communities of Nayu and Palumpa, are stranded and have been for weeks and will be for months. The Roper River is rising as well. The community of Beswick remains stranded, and we're thinking of everyone who's been affected by these floods and concerned about their cause and about their escalation here across the Northern Territory, out of sight and out of mind of so many places in this country. If you would like to donate to people affected by the floods, my colleagues will put in a link to a crowdfunder by Merripin Arts, which is an art centre in the Daly River whose print shop has been completely decimated by these floods. So this webinar will be recorded and we're going to have a Q&A at the end. I'll be speaking to each of the three speakers in turn, and I will introduce each of them as I speak to them. You can find the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and that allows you to type your question. So type them in as you think of them, and hopefully we'll be able to return to them at the end. So before I get to our panel and this discussion, I would like to first provide just a little bit of context for the place that we're talking about. This is the mighty Daly River. It's a river of extraordinary natural and cultural significance, and it's nestled in the middle of the Daly bioregion. It's incredibly special. It's beloved by so many people across Australia, and right now is in flood. And it's part of an incredibly significant ecosystem that extends right across Northern Australia. And we're very privileged to live in this part of the world. We have the largest intact savanna ecosystem remaining on Earth. It's absolutely incredible. And nestled within this savanna landscape are some of the last free-flowing rivers in Australia. There's a good concentration of them in Tasmania as well, I should note. But the Daly River is one of these rivers, and it's a rare privilege to live amongst river systems and savanna landscapes like this. They just don't exist anywhere else in the world. I did want to provide a little bit of information about how we got to this point with Claravale. And about 3 or 4 years ago, actually it was 4 years ago almost to the day, I drove with my colleagues along Dorisvale Road to the Daly River. It's about 3 hours south of Darwin. And the landscape was just absolutely stunning. It was sort of at the end of the wet season. It was iconically Northern Australia. So a ribbon of blue-green water nestled between the eucalypts and grassy understory, which is completely characteristic of our northern savanna. And the place was just absolutely alive. We spotted partridge pigeons at the edge of their range. We watched as black cockatoos flew noisily overhead, and we hoped to catch a glimpse of, the endangered Gouldian finch known to frequent the area. And the pandanus was creaking by the riverbank, and the paperbarks were swaying in the heat. And, we were literally kind of dodging crocodiles at the river edge and watching fish jump out of the water in front of us. And nature was abundant, as it so often is here in the north. And suddenly we were confronted with this. The vista just changed. To our right, as we were coming along this road, the trees were replaced with bare earth, extending for hundreds of metres into the distance. We stopped to look more closely and picked up the earth, and it was just sort of red sand that blew away with the breeze. And it was cleared pretty much all the way to the riverbank, providing a pathway for erosion and sediment to enter the mighty Daly River. And it was stripped of the riparian vegetation that usually protects the river. And it's still a shock here in the Northern Territory to discover bulldozed land. It just doesn't feel right. And I cannot imagine what it felt like for the Waggaman traditional owners who became aware of this as it was happening. And this is a quote from Daphne Huddleston that featured on the 7:30 report back in 2023. When we discovered this and we made a complaint to the Northern Territory Government, that set in train a sequence of events. It then became apparent that that land had been cleared without appropriate permits, and this was a problem that was escalating across the Northern Territory as the cotton industry literally moved up from the Murray-Darling Basin to sort of colonise, as it were, new areas. And we managed to get a prosecution of the company for that land clearing, which was then dropped last year. And then the owners applied to clear a further 5,000 or 6,000 hectares, which essentially led us to argue very, very hard that it should be referred for assessment under our federal nature law, the EPBC Act, the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act. And this has been a battle going back and forth now for 4 or 5 years. Finally, at the end of last year, we managed to get a referral of this particular proposal under the EPBC Act. And it was only the second agricultural land clearing proposal ever referred under the EPBC Act in the Northern Territory, which is pretty extraordinary. And we assumed there would be an assessment under our federal laws, but we were completely gobsmacked when the decision was made by Minister Murray Watt that it didn't require an assessment, that it was not a controlled action. And that was just a few weeks ago. This is occurring within a broader context in the Northern Territory where we're seeing escalating deforestation for agriculture and also for cotton as that takes hold in the Northern Territory. And those rates have been increasing. They increased under the Labor government here locally as well, but we saw a huge uptick last year with about 35,000 hectares approved for clearing, mainly by the Pastoral Land Board. So we're seeing this issue escalating here and barely any referrals or assessments under our federal nature laws. So that's the context of what we're talking about. This is the place we're talking about. And I'm now going to hand over to our incredible panel to make sense of what's going on here, to contextualise it within the broader fight for nature in Australia and also learn about the incredibly iconic and beautiful species that live in this area. So I'll stop sharing now and I'm going to introduce someone who needs no introduction. Dr. Bob Brown, who is, of course, an activist, environmentalist, author, founder and former leader of the Australian Greens, a complete national treasure. And we're just so grateful to Bob for being with us tonight and for your solidarity with us on Claravale. So, Bob, I was going to ask you, first of all, you've got a lot more experience than some of us on this call in fighting for nature, and you've had some pretty massive wins, some terrible losses. But for all of us watching tonight and taking part in this who care about the Northern Territory's nature, and we're really devastated by this outcome on Claravale, what words of wisdom do you have for us?
Well, firstly, thank you. I'm very honoured to be on this webinar, Kirsty, with you and Environment Centre Northern Territory and our other experts, because we are basically outcasts from the political power base of this country, which has is really dictated to by the corporate sector and big money. But we have one thing that they don't have, and that is public support. And we must never underestimate that and we're talking about a national and global heirloom here in the tropical savanna forests, and not least, but in particular, in the Northern Territory. And that public support is, and you've done wonders already, but there's more to come, needs galvanising, and that means we folk, the 95% or whatever that lives south of the tropics, needs to be engaged in this and will be, and we'll take it up. How to get to those people and to get them active is something we can certainly talk about. I have to tell you, as far as being a national treasure is concerned, this is the first Environment Minister. I'm talking about Murray Watt, and he's a Labor Environment Minister who has refused to see me or my foundation. In the last 50 years, I've been lobbying environment ministers since Lake Pedder and the Gough Whitlam government, and there's never been one that's closed the door. But this fella has, and that's because he's weak. He knows he's doing the wrong thing. He's incredibly fearful of publicity coming to him, and he cannot look people like you, Kirsty, and people like our fellow panellists here in the eye because he has no leg to stand on. And our problem is with the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, and I was in the Senate in 1999 when that went through and opposed it because I thought the previous legislation, which at least said with projects like Claravale, you have to be able to show that there's no prudent or feasible alternative if you're going to go ahead. Well, they got rid of that clause because there's always a prudent and feasible alternative to doing such things as bulldozing these species-rich and such important in Aboriginal heritage as the Savannah and the Daly River. But he is pathetic and weak and vulnerable, but he's in a power of great strength, and he's handpicked by our Prime Minister. And there's no doubt about this. I think there's going to be a rollback on Labor at the next election on a whole range of issues, but the environment's going to be there at the forefront. And I would hope that when that time comes, this terrible decision that's been made, that they won't even assess the plight of such fabulous creatures as the Gouldian finch and the ghost bat and the turtle and the swordfish. It's just that river system and the land with it and the forests and the savannas and the integrity of that. They're not even going to look at it. It's an outrage. But what it does show about that national legislation, we environmentalists put a lot of time in trying to fix it up, to make it strong. Forget it. What we have to do is get people in power who will take the environment seriously and use that sort of legislation, full of weasel words, to power up the environment instead of to throw out the environment. And in Murray Watt and the opposition spokespeople on the environment, we have and I saw your Northern Territory Minister for the Environment speaking about this on that 7:30 program, and it was just disgraceful. Just disgraceful. She didn't know what she was talking about, but she was just there to represent the corporations and against the interests of the First Territorians and certainly against the interests of the environment. So here we are, way down south, where bananas don't grow, and we've got an enormous commiseration for this decision. It is wrong. I don't know whether legal action's being taken. I suspect so. But I'd urge everybody who's listening to be aware that that can't be done easily, and it does require funding. And Environment Centre Northern Territory, which is a remarkably great organisation, It is out there. As you say, Kirsty, you came across that. I didn't know that. I just heard you talking about. You came across that flattened land and took action. You weren't in the office just projecting or reading about it and then writing letters. That taking of action is incredibly important. So I don't have good news on the immediate environment front. I think the decision by the minister not to refer this proposed clearing at Claravale for proper national assessment, because it's a national issue with so many threatened species. Under natural, if you look at natural law, it's criminal behaviour. If you look at our law, human laws, of course, he's doing what those who set that law want to do, and that is to pulverise the environment. What I can tell you is that there's 26 million people in this country, and I'll guarantee if they knew about it, you'd have on the north side of 20 million people wanting this outrage stopped.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bob. And it's so important for us up here, out of sight and out of mind, to have the solidarity of those living elsewhere. Campaigns here have to make it nationally, from Jabiluka to Ranger to Muckaty. And I know in Tasmania, you know that to be true as well. And in fact, you pioneered the model, Bob. So thank you for that. I was just going to ask briefly, and you did touch on it, a lot of stock was put by the environment movement and by people in Australia last year in this EPBC reform, being able to save nature effectively. What's your view on that, and what went wrong last year?
Well, I know that it was going to be voted down by the opposition, so the Greens, with some amendments, supported it because it was better than what we had. But that incrementalism in the overall order of things has done very little to improve the fortunes of environmentalist campaigning to save this nation's environmental and indeed Indigenous heritage. While I think, and our foundation here with the campaigns for forests and the Tarkina rainforest and so on, against both mining and logging, we'll take legal action where we can. And we've been also able to have courts override ministers because they've been too fast and they haven't gone through the process they needed to adequately come up with a decision like the one that Murray Watt's just come up with. So I'll be interested to hear how you go in seeing what his explanation for making that decision was and what your legal people think about it. But it's limited because the law is set by corporations. There's two things corporations are doing. One is getting laws, environmental laws, weakened where they can and preventing new ones coming in. And the other one, of course, is to criminalise peaceful environmentalists going about protesting about what's happening to the environment, which is that when we have less wildlife left, less forest left, less savanna left, less clear rivers left, less beautiful seas left than ever before in history, they've put their foot on the accelerator. And it's no good saying they don't know what they're doing. They're totally responsible for it. And we have to stand up to them. So there's a difficulty. Good-hearted, kind-hearted, generous, thoughtful people who care about future generations, who care about first Australians' rights, who care about our fellow creatures, on the other hand, have to stand up to these bullies and small-minded people who can only see money and greed. And, you know, I've read about the people who own Claravale, and I saw that the station and farm came up for sale at the end of last year. And you can see the massive amount of money that's being made out of simply exploiting this country. Smash it and leave it with a big pile of money in your pocket. I can't think of anything that's more damaging to human interests and to what we see of ourselves than just that sort of behaviour. But that being said, I think that the best we can do here is to, and the best the rest of the environment movement can do is don't be fixated with those environmental laws. We've got to get into power people who are going to save the environment, protect the environment, and embarrassing them all the way to the ballot box. And we certainly, from our small corner in Tasmania, intend to do that with this government to the next election. People say, "Oh, the opposition's worse." Well, show me the difference. Look at this extraordinary example of failure by a Labor government. Show me the difference. And when it comes to so many other issues affecting the environment in Australia, the Labor government's behaving in the same, and has since Albanese became Prime Minister. Anyway, that's a big job to the side. The fact is, just looking at that picture again behind you, reminds me of what an enormously powerful visual as well as oral and written story there is here. And I don't think they've seen the half of it yet, but there'll be a lot more of it. Thanks to Environment Centre Northern Territory. We wouldn't be having this discussion. We wouldn't be looking at the opportunities without you gutsy folk up there and intelligent, kind-hearted, generous folk up there who are taking this on and just being knocked down by an environmental bully who should have been supporting you, not opposing you. But he's going to regret that before we're all through.
Thank you so much, Bob. And I'm really proud of the Environment Centre's work, but I always say we're just nothing without the people who really are the cornerstone of the environment movement here in the Northern Territory, and we're growing all the time. There's a bunch of people sitting in the ECNT community space now, and we know that this is an exquisite place of incredible natural and cultural beauty, and more people are willing to stand up and do what they need to do to protect it. So I might now move to our next speaker, who will be not so much talking about the political failure, but talking about what this failure means on the ground for the creatures whose fate rests on these decisions. And I would like to introduce Dr. Richard Seaton, who's the Director of Terrestrial Birds at Birdlife Australia, a wonderful organisation. And he has been chasing red goshawks across the savannas for decades, most recently working with ranger groups in the top end to survey for red goshawks, our rarest bird of prey. So my question for Richard is, this beautiful raptor has completely disappeared, unbelievably, from more than a third of its range, but the northern savannas are its very last stronghold. What happens to this species if large-scale deforestation across the northern savannas continues? And I'd love you to start, before answering that question, just to explain why this bird is so special, because most people have never seen one.
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, well, I guess I've been a bird of prey nerd since I was a little kid. I've been lucky enough to work with birds of prey all over the world with some magnificent species. And since coming to Australia, the red goshawk has just captivated me. It is just something else. It's an incredibly stunning bird, as you can see from the photo here. It's medium-sized bird of prey, about the size of a whistling kite, black kite, that a lot of people will be familiar with, but it has this really rich rufous colouring. You can't see in this photo, but they've got a little crest at the back of them, which makes them look pretty mean. And they're a stocky bird as well. And they've got these, unlike a lot of the kites, the black kites, the leatherwing whistling kites, they have these huge, powerful yellow legs. I always think of them as like a brown goshawk that a lot of people will be familiar with, but with wedge-tailed eagle's feet attached to them. They're just this incredibly powerful and exciting birds bird of prey that lives in the tropical savannas now. They're unique. They hunt and feed on parrots. You've got to be a pretty formidable hunter to catch parrots. They will largely feeding on lorikeets, but they'll take things as large as a sulfur-crested cockatoo or a black cockatoo. They are naturally rare in the environment, but they've become increasingly rare over the last few decades. As Kirsty said, they've been lost from over 30% of their range now. They used to occur right across the top end, all the way down to south of Sydney. And then the last couple of decades, due to habitat clearance and habitat degradation, they've been entirely lost from the eastern seaboard. They're no longer breeding in New South Wales, and they're no longer breeding in most of Queensland. They've been pushed right back into the top of Cape York. So the NT is a hugely significant. The savanna areas of the NT are hugely significant for this wonderful bird. They've been uplisted in 2023 to endangered, and to give you some context, after all the work we've been doing on this bird for the last while, we only ever know of between 10 and 15 nests of the red goshawk across the country every year. There's possibly up to 1,000 individuals out there, but they're an incredibly sparse and endangered species that could easily be lost from right under our noses if we let this sort of habitat clearance continue unabated.
What an incredible bird. It's just exquisite. And it's devastating to hear that, Richard. So what does Claravale and this particular decision mean specifically for these birds that you've been tracking?
Well, the loss of habitat, that 30% that I talk about that's been lost, that was largely, death by 1,000 cuts in Queensland, and I think there's really important lessons to be learnt there. Even experts working on this species just weren't really sure whether they'd gone or not. We've now really unequivocally proven that they've been lost from this vast tract of land. So Claravale in the NT, it represents prime habitat for this species. They nest in the top of tall tetradonta, Eucalyptus tetradonta trees, Darwin stringybark in the savannas, and then along the rivers, they'll also nest in the large paperbark trees. So the loss of that habitat, there's a nest here, they often nest in the tallest trees, in the tallest patch, and Claravale has some amazing habitat that's suitable for red goshawks. They nest on these horizontal branches that come out from the tree. It's quite characteristic and sort of 25, 30 meters up in the trees. So incredibly hard to find. So that there's been no red goshawk breed nests found on Claravale yet is of no surprise at all, because nobody's looked, and even when you look, they're incredibly difficult to find. But we know of red goshawks breeding nearby in Nipmuc and in other areas. And as Kirsty alluded to, we've been, as a PhD student, Chris McCall with the University of Queensland, he's been tracking a number of birds across the top end for the last 10 years. We've had a bird that we've been tracking, a female from Litchfield National Park, and every year she makes a movement down into the arid zone and moves back, and she passes through Claravale. So we're 100% certain that birds would be using Claravale, and this is a significant site for this significant species. They're only found in Australia as well. I should make that clear.
Wow, thank you so much, Richard. I didn't know that information about your tracking data actually, but that's pretty stunning news to me. And of course, what is characterising a lot of large-scale deforestation across the Northern Territory is that it's being approved with no surveys at all. So we just simply do not know what we are losing. which is a terrible tragedy. I'm now going to pass to our final amazing speaker, Dr. Nicola Hanrahan, who is a Darwin legend, and she is the leading expert in ghost bat ecology and conservation, and ghost bats have fast become the Environment Centre's one of our favourite animals, definitely our favourite bat. Very strange looking creature maybe to most people. And she is with the Research Institute for Environment and Livelihoods with Charles Darwin University and has absolutely first-hand experience with the ghost bats of Claravale, and has studied this particular population extensively. And she's also chair of the National Ghost Bat Recovery Team. Nicola, ghost bats, tell us about them and why we should love them.
Sure. Yeah. Ghost bats they're pretty fascinating and iconic creature. You know, when I first got to see them in the hand, it was just extraordinary. They're so beautiful. I think they're gorgeous in my opinion. People may not share that, but I think they're absolutely beautiful and just striking, you know, with their big ears and the big nose leaf, and you know, they're a big bat. You know, people generally think of flying foxes when you talk about bats, or they think about the little echolocating bats that fly around their houses, but these guys are in the middle, you know, the wingspan of 70 centimeters. And, you know, they might potentially rival the red goshawk as a predator, not quite as big types of birds, but they have been known to take a lorikeet or two. So they're pretty ferocious predators as well. Yeah, and the first time I got to meet the ghost bats of Claravale was in 2016 as part of my PhD project. And the aim of that project was to look into their social vocalization, to kind of work out how they talk to each other within the roost, how they use different social calls. And I had a number of different sites across the Northern Territory, but Claravale was a little bit different because it was, you know, off the beaten track, and it was quite the adventure to find the roost. All I had was some handwritten notes from a bat research legend, Les Hall, who had been out, you know, 20, 30 years before me, and a little handwritten dot on a map to say this is approximately where the roost is. But thankfully we found a spot okay, and we set up some sound and video recording devices, and it was amazing then to find out that the ghost bats were still hanging around there.
So amazing. And can you just sort of elaborate a little bit on why this population is so important and your concerns about the impact that clearing would have?
Sure. Yeah, so the Claravale population is important because its survival is important for the health of the ghost bat population as a whole, the national ghost bat population. There's three main reasons, I think, why this population is so important. And I guess the first is the area in which they roost. You know, they roost in this Tyndall limestone formation, and generally roost options are quite tricky to find and limited for ghost bats because they have quite specific cave microclimate requirements. And this band of limestone is just perfect habitat for the ghost bat. It offers this, you know, multiple natural stable cave roosts that are suitable for like different life stages, mating, maternity, movement. And these stable roost options are really critical, particularly in this Pine Creek Daly region, because the majority of the ghost bats in that region are supported by disused mines, which are unstable. And so it's important to have these stable formations in the region. Secondly, this population is really important because we know there's a maternity colony on Claravale Station. And this is a maternity colony at the roost where the females give birth to pups and then they raise their pups. And they raise their pups for quite a long time. They don't tend to wean their pups until they're 5 months old, well beyond the juveniles have learned to hunt. They're still supporting their pups, and the females tend to come back to the same roost year after year to breed. And in addition to that non-maternity roost, there's at least another 10 caves in that area, and 4 of them now have records of ghost bats in there, and most of them haven't been surveyed in such a long time. So, you know, when I was out there, we estimated there was 100 ghost bats in that one cave, but previous surveys by cavers estimated, you know, 500 in that one cave. So that's a huge number of ghost bats there. And the third reason why Claravale is really important is that when we looked at the genetics and the relatedness between ghost bats in the top end, the Claravale was kind of an intermediary population between the Pine Creek ghost bats and the Catherine ghost bat. And this, you know, interconnectivity is really important for that genetic diversity and for the health of ghost bats as a whole. And in terms of the impacts, I guess, like, that I'm worried about for the ghost bat, it's around that removal of foraging habitat. So ghost bats, of course, need cave roosts, but they also need adequate foraging resources in order to support that population. Otherwise, they can't live in these caves. Now, we've a lot of knowledge gaps still relating to the foraging ecology of the ghost bat, but from the limited studies that have been done, we do know that, you know, they have a diverse diet of prey, and in order to find that prey, which includes small mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, large insects, there needs to be good quality habitat surrounding the roost to support that prey. And ghost bats are known to, you know, routinely forage between 3 and 8 kilometers from the roost, but it's not uncommon for them to forage to 15, and we've even had records of them flying over 25 kilometers away from the roost in the night and returning. And so that's to say that even if roosts are not directly impacted, proposed clearing is well within the foraging range of the ghost bats of Claravale. And they actually forage in quite a range of vegetation types. They have a preference for open woodlands and creek lines. But what we know is the one thing is really important for them, and that's the vegetation structure. They need perching trees in order to hunt. They need their perch and ambush predator. So they perch in trees and they watch, and they then will ambush their prey on the ground or in the air surrounding vegetation. So without perching vegetation, the habitat becomes unsuitable. And tracking studies have also shown that ghost bats will routinely revisit foraging areas night after night. And they also use the same flight pathways between foraging areas and roost sites. And so we don't know if individuals can readily, you know, move into different foraging areas, especially if they're already occupied by ghost bats. And therefore, the removal of foraging habitat can directly impact and remove that foraging habitat for these individuals.
Thanks so much, Nicola. So we need the trees is the message. Yeah. We are going to move to a Q&A very soon, but I will ask Nicola just one final question that you can perhaps answer briefly. We're running a little bit behind time, but I think we're doing pretty well, all things considered. When you heard about the decision that Claravale wasn't a controlled action, what was your response to that?
I was shocked and disappointed. You know, you expect some action. My expectation was that it was going to be considered controlled action, and at a minimum there'd be a requirement to better assess potential impacts by conducting, you know, site-specific studies. Yeah,
that's right. And I think we were all quite shocked. And I should mention, while we've been speaking about ghost bats and red goshawks, there are a raft of other species that are threatened, that are listed under the EPBC Act, that could be impacted by this as well. They include beautiful species that have been recently listed, like the northern blue-tongued skink, the pig-nosed turtle, which is endemic in Australia to the Daly River, although it may be in a couple of other rivers, but it's its special place. the freshwater sawfish, which has also been uplisted to endangered recently, and a number of other species. And on average, every single land clearing approval in the Northern Territory that's been given in the last 20 years has impacted the modelled range of something like 12 to 13 listed threatened species, and there has never been an assessment of any of that deforestation. So I'm now going to move to a quick Q&A. We're going to try to finish in sort of about 5 minutes. I do have the first question from Claire, which I'm going to split up into 2 parts. So the first question is for Bob, which is, the first question, is for Bob, but it's from Amanda. And it's, how do we best galvanise people in a media-saturated world?
Well, we have to know, because it's true, that the big majority of people are already wanting to hear good news on the environment. And them becoming part of that good news is very, very important. It's just struck me while we're sitting here, the number of journals where I could place, for example, an article, but there is an unlimited number of sites and newspapers which the politicians read the front page and the letter columns in particular of local and national newspapers. So there's enough information on this night for everyone who's listening here to write a letter to the Courier Mail or the Age or the Australian, doesn't matter, and your local newspaper, just saying, Murray Watt's got this wrong, he should do it again, and here's why, and list just the 2 species, but the others that you've been talking about, Kirsty.
Yeah, and I've just noticed a message coming in from the chat that has nearly brought me to tears, but it's from Louise Visser. Hi, Bob. I'm sitting in Katherine Community Radio Station broadcasting this webinar for the people of Katherine and beyond. Our river is at 17.3 metres and predicted to rise to 17.6 metres tonight. We are in the midst of our second major flood in 2 weeks. What is one thing that all of us can do to help make this not the new norm?
Well, it's to get active on the environment. Don't get depressed, get active. And I don't know the circumstances of the Daly River catchment. What I do know, it's a global truth, that clearing land makes for worse floods. We know that climate change is doing that, and that 1 degree temperature up, which we've got already, 7% more saturation of the air with water and bigger floods. But clearing of land and of course the pollution of that beautiful river, I saw those pictures of what's already happened at Claravale, and tons of that is probably washing into that river right now and off that soil. It's a terrible fix. But I think the thing to do is you have to, my heart goes out to you folk in Katherine and right through the river system. But we have to deal with that. It's not just a news saturation. We're actually put upon by tragedies like this. But we have to understand that we've got to do better than hand this on to the next generation. And us making a stand on it's important. And so, folk in particular writing from Katherine or anywhere down the Daly River or from the Territory for that matter, write to Albo, the Honourable Prime Minister of Australia, Parliament House, Canberra, and write it in your own handwriting or on a nice card and say, I want you to stop this Claravale outrage. Let me know how you're going to do that. Now, he'll pass that on to several ministers, but it gets to the attention right at the top there. So write to the Honourable Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, Parliament House, Canberra, 2600, and you're underway in helping fix this problem.
Love it. Thank you. And Louise, we're all thinking of you in Katherine, and right across the Northern Territory. And I'm so happy that this is being broadcast to people in Katherine. I've got a great question from Janet, and I am going to return to Claire's, I promise, which is, and it's more for Richard and Nicola. So can you please describe the impact of these enormous clearances on the loss of interconnecting habitat corridors and the impact on connectivity of all animal and insect connectivity? Can you have a go at answering that question, please?
Yeah, I guess it all adds up, right? Like every time an area is cleared, it's just more and more habitat that's being removed. The ghost bat is quite a mobile species, but they're still quite restricted in terms of their needs, their route, how far they can fly, their social structure. And so, you know, these clearing of corridors can impact them by removing the foraging habitat, but also we know very little about how that kind of thing impedes movement too, so it can have quite big effects.
Yeah, I'd add to that the red goshawks require vast areas of intact biodiverse woodland. And so, yeah, it's essential that, you know, the connectivity of those habitats and the large areas of biodiverse intact land are protected and maintained for that species and all the other species that sit below the predators at the top of the food chain, like ghost bats and red goshawks.
Thank you so much. I will now respond to Claire's question, which was, let me get the wording exactly. Can the decision, not a controlled action, be challenged? He has a duty to investigate threatened species as the Environment Minister. Very good question, and I just want to assure everyone on this call and all our supporters in the Northern Territory and elsewhere that the Environment Centre is investigating all legal options. We're looking at this very carefully. With our lawyers, Environmental Justice Australia, we are going to keep going, and we're going to do everything we can to save the habitat and the precious place that is Claravale Station on Waggaman country, and for that matter, all of the other places that are at risk of being decimated by the bulldozers here in the Northern Territory. Unfortunately, we are just a few minutes over time, but we've done a pretty good job. We're going to have to call it now. And I just want to say just a huge thank you to our panellists. You've all been absolutely extraordinary. We're so honoured that you've been able to join us and to join people in the Northern Territory who are so concerned about this decision. So thank you, Bob Brown, Richard Seaton and Nicola Hanrahan. We are going to keep fighting here at ECNT. I just want to echo Bob's call to us all across the Northern Territory to just keep going, keep fighting. Let's keep building our power. We know that we have power. We know that it's building here, and we know that we're on the right side. And I just really encourage you all to get involved, to write to the Prime Minister. I think a handwritten letter is always the most persuasive. If you want to do a lower bull ask, then please sign our petition, which will be shared in the chat. And we're calling on Murray Watt to ensure that any proposed mass deforestation in the Northern Territory is referred and assessed under federal environment laws. And there's so many other ways you can get involved with our work. We have groups popping up all over the Northern Territory wanting to stand up for nature and communities and climate. We've got to just build our power together. So thank you all so much. Thank you again to our panellists. Thoughts again go out to those impacted by flooding, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.